When the Doge, in his purple mantle, sat enthroned in the Palazzo Ducale, no one suspected that true power resided in the shadows. Behind every great decision of the Venetian Republic stood individuals whose names were never mentioned in official chronicles. The Hermetic Brotherhood of Venice, a secret society of philosophers, alchemists, and astrologers, invisibly guided the destiny of the maritime power for centuries. They sought no glory, preferring to act from the shadows in the name of Saint Mark, patron of the Republic. In the labyrinthine canals and narrow streets of the Serenissima, these people exchanged knowledge deemed too dangerous for ordinary citizens. Their symbols can be found on palace facades and in cathedral mosaics. Imperceptible to the uninitiated, but clearly legible to members of the Brotherhood. When Venice concluded advantageous trade agreements or thwarted rivals' plans, an unseen intellect was behind it, calculating the future with the help of ancient knowledge and secret sciences. In the 15th century, Venice stood at the crossroads of worlds. Eastern winds brought not only spices and silks, but also ancient knowledge, long hidden from the European mind. It was here, among the lagoons and canals, that Hermetic teachings found fertile ground for their revival. It all began in 1463, when the monk Leonardo da Pistoia brought manuscripts attributed to the legendary Hermes Trismegistus to Italy. These texts, known as the Corpus Hermeticum, fell into the hands of Cosimo de' Medici, who immediately commissioned their translation by the young philosopher Marsilio Ficino. Ficino put aside his work on Plato's translations and immersed himself in the Hermetic texts, revealing to Europe ancient wisdom in which Egyptian magic, Greek philosophy, and elements of early Christianity intertwined. When the translated texts reached Venice, they caused a real intellectual explosion among local scholars. Small groups of educated Venetians, doctors, astronomers, mathematicians, began to gather in taverns near St. Mark's Square. They discussed ideas about the unity of macrocosm and microcosm, about the correspondence of celestial spheres to the human body, about the possibility of comprehending divine mysteries through the study of nature. One of the first Venetian Hermeticists was Giorgio Barbarigo, a physician and astrologer whose house on Cannaregio became the meeting place for the first secret circle. Here, behind closed doors, by candlelight, forbidden texts were read and the first alchemical experiments were conducted. But the true flourishing of Venetian Hermeticism is associated with the name of Francesco Giorgi, a Franciscan monk who, in 1525, published the treatise De Harmonia Mundi, on the harmony of the world. This work, which combined Kabbalistic wisdom with Neoplatonism and Christian mysticism, became the unspoken manifesto of the emerging Brotherhood. The members of the first Hermetic circles did not publicize their meetings. The Venetian Republic, despite its relative religious tolerance, was suspicious of any secret societies. The Inquisition, though not as cruel as in other parts of Italy, carefully monitored manifestations of heresy. Behind the facade of the powerful Venetian Republic lay a complex system of hidden power, the Hermetic Brotherhood, whose organizational structure was as refined as the architecture of the Serenissima itself. Just as the canals of Venice form a network invisible to the outsider's eye, so too did the Brotherhood create a multi-layered hierarchy that allowed it to remain in the shadows for centuries. At the core of the structure was a system of 3 concentric circles. The outer circle, the, quote, zero, included those who were just beginning their journey into Hermetic knowledge: talented students, promising artisans, junior members of noble families. Many of them did not even suspect that they were being evaluated for admission into a secret society, considering their mentors simply educated Venetians. The middle circle, the quote, one, consisted of full members of the Brotherhood who had undergone an initiation ritual in one of the secret temples hidden in the basements of Venetian palazzi. It was the guardians who performed the main work, gathering information, conducting research, and implementing the Brotherhood's ideas into various spheres of the Republic's life. Among them were doctors who treated doges, architects who designed city buildings, and captains of merchant ships who explored distant lands. But true power belonged to the inner circle, the quote, which had nothing in common with the official governmental body of the same name. This council comprised masters of the highest degree of initiation, who had achieved perfection in Hermetic sciences. Their names were known only to each other, and their meetings took place in a special hall with a dome painted with astrological symbols. According to some accounts, this hall was located beneath the waters of the lagoon and was accessible only through underwater tunnels. Decision-making within the Brotherhood followed the ancient principle of the quote. Each issue was considered from 7 different perspectives, corresponding to the 7 planets of classical astrology. The council member responsible for the Saturn aspect analyzed long-term consequences. The representative of Jupiter assessed the impact on power and wealth. Mars was responsible for military and conflict situations. The Sun, for matters of prestige and overt influence. Venus oversaw diplomacy and alliances. Mercury dealt with communications and trade. The Moon tracked public sentiment and hidden currents. Only when all 7 aspects came into equilibrium was a decision considered made, and then passed down for execution to the lower levels of the machinery. This method ensured the prudence and foresight of the Brotherhood's policies, allowing it to act not in the interests of individuals, but for the prosperity of all Venice. The preservation of secrecy was ensured by many sophisticated methods. Members of the Brotherhood never used their real names at meetings, addressing each other by astrological or alchemical titles. Documents were composed using complex ciphers based on Hermetic symbols. The most important decisions were transmitted orally through a system of mnemonic formulas which, without special training, appeared to be meaningless verses or prayers. In a world where every stone could hold a secret message and every gesture contained a hidden meaning, the Hermetic Brotherhood of Venice created a unique language of symbols, understandable only to the initiated. This complex system of signs and rituals transformed the entire city into a vast book that only members of the secret society could read. The central symbol of the Brotherhood became the winged lion, the traditional image of Saint Mark the Evangelist, patron saint of Venice. However, in the Hermetic tradition, the lion acquired additional meanings. For the initiated, it was a symbol of the philosophical sun, alchemical gold, and higher spiritual transformation. It is no coincidence that in many depictions, the Venetian lion holds a book, a sign of secret knowledge, accessible only to the chosen. The city's architecture was saturated with Hermetic symbols, artfully woven into the decor of buildings. The marble facades of palaces were adorned with mysterious rosettes featuring 7 pointed stars, a reference to the 7 planets of classical astrology. In the ornaments of churches, intertwined triangles could be found, symbolizing the unity of the earthly and the heavenly. And on the pediments of some palazzos, images of a pelican feeding its young with its blood appeared, an alchemical symbol of the great work. The mosaics of St. Mark's Basilica held special significance. Beneath the apparent simplicity of biblical narratives lay encrypted messages. Thus, the famous mosaic depicting the creation of the world contained Hermetic cosmogony, and scenes from the life of Christ were arranged according to astrological principles. For communication among Brotherhood members, a complex system of gestures and conditional phrases was used. A special handshake, an imperceptible tilt of the head to outsiders, or a characteristic touch to a ring, all served as a way of recognizing their own. In conversations, the initiated used ambiguous expressions that had one meaning for the uninitiated and a completely different one for Brotherhood members. Initiation rituals were conducted in special underground chambers located beneath certain palaces or churches. These ceremonies recreated the symbolic death and rebirth of the neophyte. The initiate passed through 4 elemental trials: earth, water, air, and fire, symbolically cleansing themselves of earthly attachments and gaining a new Hermetic vision of the world. One of the Brotherhood's most mysterious rituals was the so-called work with the shadow, a practice during which the initiated learned to separate their astral body from the physical and direct it to gather information or influence events. According to some sources, it was this method that allowed Brotherhood members to invisibly attend important state councils and influence the decisions of the doges. Behind every great doge of Venice stood an invisible advisor, a truth known only to a select few initiates. In the shadows of opulent palaces and beneath the arches of majestic cathedrals, members of the Hermetic Brotherhood developed a sophisticated system for infiltrating the Republic's power structures, ensuring their control over key decisions without overt presence. One of their primary mechanisms of influence was the system of, quote, many doges, particularly in the 16th and 17th centuries, had personal confessors and advisors who were, in fact, high-ranking members of the Brotherhood. For example, Doge Leonardo Donato, who reigned from 1606 to 1612, regularly consulted with the astrologer Paolo Sarpi, who, as secret archives reveal, held the position of, quote, within the Brotherhood's hierarchy. Another effective method was the strategic placement of Brotherhood members in government positions. Hermetics never sought to occupy the Doge's post itself. That would have attracted too much attention. Instead, they controlled positions that seemed secondary, but actually provided access to vital information and the decision-making process. Particularly illustrative is the case of Antonio Priuli, elected Doge in 1618. His secretary for diplomatic affairs was Giovanni Battista Leoni, a man whose name is rarely mentioned in official chronicles. However, in the diaries of the Venetian aristocrat Niccolò Contarini, there is a mention that Leoni wore a ring bearing the image of Hermes, an identifying mark of members of the Brotherhood's inner circle. It was Leoni who drafted most of the diplomatic documents signed by Priuli, and it was he who organized the Doge's secret meetings with ambassadors of foreign powers. Under his influence, Venice concluded a lucrative trade agreement with the Ottoman Empire in 1621, ensuring the Republic's monopoly on the trade of Eastern spices in the Adriatic Sea. No less important a mechanism of influence was the use of family ties. The Brotherhood carefully tracked talented young men from noble families and drew them into its ranks. Within a generation, these young men became influential figures in the Senate or the Council of Ten, while maintaining loyalty to Hermetic ideals. Thus, 3 generations of the Mocenigo family were connected to the Brotherhood, allowing it to control crucial decisions for almost a century. When Luigi Mocenigo was elected Doge in 1763, 5 members of the small council under him belonged to the Hermetic Brotherhood, ensuring complete control over state policy. Behind the facade of the majestic maritime republic, where gold flowed like a river through trade channels, lay a secret force that steered Venice's economic course. The Hermetic Brotherhood didn't just influence politics, It created a unique system for managing trade flows, transforming the lagoon city into the richest power in the Mediterranean. While official chronicles lauded the wisdom of Venetian merchants, the true architects of prosperity were members of the Brotherhood, who applied Hermetic sciences to predict market trends. They developed a complex system combining astrological observations with mathematical calculations, allowing them to anticipate price fluctuations for key commodities: spices, silk, glass. A special role in this system was played by the Council of Mercury, a secret body consisting of 7 members of the Brotherhood, each overseeing a specific trade direction. They met at full moon in a hidden room of the Fondaco dei Tedeschi, the trading house of German merchants. Here, beneath frescoes painted by Giorgione and Titian, decisions were made that determined which goods would be prioritized in the next season. One of the Brotherhood's greatest achievements was the creation of the, quote, a secret atlas containing not only navigational charts but also indications of optimal times for trade expeditions based on astrological cycles. Captains who gained access to this knowledge invariably returned with the greatest profits, strengthening the Republic's power. In 1547, when pepper prices plummeted due to Portuguese supplies, it was the Brotherhood that saved Venice's economy. On the advice of the Hermetics, the Republic's Trade Council sent expeditions to new regions of the Levant, where exclusive contracts for the supply of high-quality spices were concluded. When a crisis erupted in European markets a year later, Venice was the only power that maintained stability. The members of the Brotherhood also developed the concept of alchemy of wealth, the transformation of ordinary goods into luxury items through the addition of symbolic value. Venetian glass, produced on the island of Murano, was chemically similar to products from other European glass workshops. However, the Hermetics created an aura of mystery and exclusivity around it, spreading legends about secret ingredients and magical rituals in its creation. The Brotherhood also held the keys to the Venetian banking system. They were the first in Europe to develop the concept of invisible money, a system of credit obligations that allowed large trade operations without the physical movement of gold. This innovation not only reduced the risks of maritime trade, but also laid the foundation for the modern banking system. Diplomacy has always been the art of the possible. But in the hands of Venetian Hermetics, it transformed into a precise science. Behind every successful alliance and the collapse of a hostile power stood not merely talented negotiators, but masters of secret knowledge, capable of calculating the future decades in advance. In 1571, the Holy League, which included Venice, Spain, and the Papal States, achieved a decisive victory over the Ottoman fleet at the Battle of Lepanto. Official chronicles attributed the formation of this alliance to the diplomatic genius of Doge Alvise Mocenigo. However, in the private correspondence of the Spanish ambassador Diego Guzmán de Silva, there is a mention of 3 Venetians in black who were present at all secret negotiations. These individuals, whose names were never mentioned in official documents, were members of the Council of Venice, a division of the Brotherhood responsible for diplomatic operations. Using a complex system of astrological calculations, they determined the ideal moment for forging the alliance and predicted the victory of Christian forces with day-by-day accuracy. No less impressive was the Brotherhood's involvement in undermining the influence of Genoa, Venice's main trade rival. In the mid-16th century, Genoese bankers controlled a significant portion of European finances. Venice could not confront them directly, but the Hermetics devised a multi-stage combination that spanned 2 decades. First, through agents of influence at the court of King Philip II of Spain, they persuaded the monarch to use Genoese loans to finance military campaigns in the Netherlands. Then, by manipulating information about New World silver mines, they provoked the Genoese into extending credits that exceeded the real capabilities of the Spanish crown. The culmination was the Spanish state default of 1575, which undermined Genoa's financial power. At the same time, Venetian ships, following routes calculated by the Hermetics, intercepted key trade flows. Within one generation, Genoa lost its status as a maritime superpower, ceding control of the eastern Mediterranean to Venice. A special art of the Brotherhood was the creation of, quote, complex, multi-layered agreements where explicit terms concealed secret arrangements. Thus, in the treaty with the Ottoman Empire of 1631, traditional trade clauses concealed secret provisions that gave Venice exclusive access to Black Sea ports in exchange for astrological predictions for the Sultan's court. Members of the Brotherhood also developed a special language of diplomacy based on Hermetic symbols. In official dispatches sent to foreign rulers, certain phrases and punctuation marks formed a hidden code, understandable only to the initiated. This allowed Venetian ambassadors to transmit secret information even under the surveillance of foreign spies. During the era of religious wars that tore Europe apart, Venice maintained a surprising neutrality. This was not accidental, but the result of the Brotherhood's carefully calibrated strategy. The Hermetics, for whom religious differences were merely external forms of a single spiritual truth, skillfully balanced between Catholic and Protestant powers, benefiting from their rivalry. In the shadow of the majestic arsenal, the largest manufacturing complex of medieval Europe, lay hidden one of the most astonishing secrets of the Venetian Republic. Behind every technological breakthrough, behind every engineering marvel that emerged from these walls, stood not just talented craftsmen, but devoted members of the Hermetic Brotherhood, who transformed shipbuilding into a true magical art. The Venetian arsenal, occupying almost 15% of the city's territory, was not merely a shipyard, but a true laboratory where Hermetic knowledge was embodied in metal and wood. Here, away from prying eyes, under the cloak of strictest secrecy, the alchemists of the Brotherhood experimented with compositions for treating ship timber, making it resistant to rot and shipworms. In 1539, when the Ottoman fleet threatened Venetian possessions in the eastern Mediterranean, the Council of Ten of the Brotherhood decided to apply secret knowledge to strengthen the Republic's naval power. Under the leadership of Master Antonio Zeno, who held the position of Chief Naval Engineer of the Arsenal and simultaneously bore the title of Keeper of the Fiery Secrets within the Brotherhood's hierarchy, a revolutionary design for galleasses was developed. Heavy warships combining the maneuverability of galleys with the firepower of sailing ships. A special feature of these vessels was the specific gun ports, arranged in accordance with the Hermetic concept of the, quote, calculations based on Pythagorean proportions, allowed for the creation of ships with unprecedented stability during artillery firing. When Venetian galleasses engaged the Ottoman fleet in the Battle of Lepanto, their superiority became evident. 6 new-type ships destroyed 70 Turkish galleys without losing a single one of their own vessels. No less impressive were the Brotherhood's achievements in metallurgy. In the hidden laboratories of the islands, alchemists experimented with various alloys, striving to create the ideal material for casting cannons. Under the guidance of Paolo Perutta, a member of the Brotherhood's inner circle, a formula for bronze was developed with the addition of special minerals extracted from the mountains of Dalmatia. Cannons cast from this alloy were lighter than traditional ones, but surpassed them in strength and range. A particular source of pride for the Brotherhood was the invention of Tu, an incendiary compound that burned even on water. The formula for this substance was kept in a special encrypted book, accessible only to the 3 highest members of the Brotherhood. When, in 1617, the Venetian fleet encountered Uskook pirates in the Adriatic, the use of this weapon led to the complete annihilation of the enemy squadron in a matter of minutes. Hermetic knowledge also found application in fortification. Members of the Brotherhood, who studied ancient treatises on geometry and astrology, applied the principles of quote in the design of defensive structures. The fortress of Palmanova, built to protect the Republic's northeastern borders, had the form of a 9-pointed star, a figure which, according to Hermetic beliefs, possessed special protective properties. Within the arsenal there was a secret school where selected students studied not only the practical aspects of shipbuilding, but also esoteric sciences. Here, the fundamentals of astrological navigation were taught, the art of charting a course by the stars, based not only on practical observations, but also on an understanding of the mystical correspondences between celestial bodies and terrestrial events. In Venice, where every decision could determine the fate of an empire, the stars served not merely as adornments of the night sky, but as a secret language accessible to the initiated. A Hermetic Brotherhood transformed astrology into a powerful instrument of state governance, allowing them to foresee the future and guide the course of history in the desired direction. Unlike ordinary astrologers, who entertained the aristocracy with predictions of romantic intrigues, members of the Brotherhood developed a sophisticated system of political astrology. They created a special methodology that combined classical Ptolemaic tradition with Egyptian techniques and Arabic innovations, allowing them to predict not the destinies of individuals, but of entire states. The Brotherhood's secret archives contained astrological charts of all significant European powers, compiled at the moment of their founding or the coronation of their rulers. These charts were regularly updated to account for planetary transits, allowing them to predict periods of strength and weakness for potential allies and adversaries. One of the most striking examples of the use of astrology in state affairs was the decision for Venice to join the Holy League against the Ottoman Empire in 1570. When Pope Pius V called upon Christian powers to unite against the Turkish threat, the Venetian Senate hesitated. The Republic had favorable trade agreements with the Sultan, and their rupture threatened economic losses. It was at this moment that the Brotherhood's secret council, gathered in a hidden chamber beneath the church of San Zaccaria, conducted multi-day astrological calculations. Master Giovanni Battista Capuano, who held the title Guardian of the Celestial Seals within the Brotherhood, discovered a rare conjunction of Jupiter and Mars in the sign of Sagittarius, a configuration presaging military success in naval battles. Simultaneously, the natal chart of Sultan Selim II showed Saturn's ingress into the 12th house, a position traditionally associated with defeats and hidden enemies. This data was secretly conveyed to Doge Alvise Mocenigo through his personal secretary, a member of the Brotherhood. A week later, Venice officially joined the Holy League, and a year later, the Christian fleet achieved a decisive victory at Lepanto. No less indicative was the case of the, quote, a conflict between Venice and Genoa in 1378. When the Genoese fleet blockaded the lagoon and it seemed that Venice was doomed to defeat, the Brotherhood's astrologers discovered an approaching eclipse coinciding with an unfavorable planetary position in Genoa's horoscope. They advised Doge Andrea Contarini to postpone the decisive battle until a specific day when Mars would enter the sign of Cancer, a position that weakens the enemy's military power. The Venetian fleet attacked precisely at the calculated moment and achieved an unexpected victory, completely turning the tide of the war. In the heart of the Venetian Republic, where every stone breathed history, the symbol of the winged lion of St. Mark was not just a coat of arms. It served as a mystical key to understanding the hidden power of the Hermetic Brotherhood. For ordinary Venetians, the evangelist Mark was the heavenly protector of their city. But for the initiated members of the Brotherhood, this image contained much deeper esoteric meanings, linking Christian tradition with ancient Hermetic wisdom. On the facade of the majestic St. Mark's Basilica, the winged lion holds an open book with the Latin inscription. However, members of the Brotherhood saw in this book not only the Gospel but also a symbolic representation of Hermes Trismegistus's emerald tablet, the foundational text of the entire Hermetic tradition. In their secret treatises, the lion was interpreted as an alchemical symbol of the solar principle, and the wings represented the elevation of matter to a spiritual state, a key concept of the alchemists' great work. Of particular importance to the Brotherhood was the legend of the translation of St. Mark's relics from Alexandria to Venice in 828. In the official version, Venetian merchants secretly removed the saint's body, hiding it under a layer of pork carcasses so that the Muslim guard would not discover the sacred remains. However, in the Brotherhood's secret archives, a different interpretation of these events was preserved. According to Hermetic texts, Alexandria was not just the resting place of the evangelist, but a center of ancient esoteric knowledge, dating back to Hermes Trismegistus himself. The Venetian merchants who carried out this act were not ordinary traders, but members of a secret order, a precursor to the Hermetic Brotherhood. Along with the saint's relics, they brought to Venice a hidden library of Alexandrian manuscripts containing lost Hermetic knowledge. In the Brotherhood's secret ceremonies, held in hidden crypts beneath St. Mark's Basilica, the initiates addressed the evangelist not only as a Christian saint, but also as a guardian of ancient wisdom. They believed that Mark, educated in Alexandria, a city where Greek philosophy, Egyptian mysteries, and Jewish Kabbalah met, was initiated into secret knowledge that was not included in the canonical Gospel. The connection between St. Mark's lion and alchemical symbolism was of particular significance. In the Hermetic tradition, the lion was associated with philosophical sulfur, one of the three main elements of the great work. The Brotherhood interpreted the winged lion as a symbol of transmutation, the process of transforming ordinary metal into gold, and, in a spiritual sense, the transformation of human nature into divine. This symbolic interpretation allowed members of the Brotherhood to use the official emblem of the Venetian Republic to convey secret messages. In diplomatic documents, architectural projects, and even on coins, they placed images of the lion with barely noticeable modifications, understandable only to the initiated. The position of the tail, the number of feathers in the wings, the tilt of the head, all these details formed a complex code through which members of the Brotherhood communicated with each other right under the noses of the authorities. The Brotherhood's boldest move was its influence on the official iconography of St. Mark in the Republic. In the 14th century, when the famous mosaics of the Basilica were breaking, several members of the Brotherhood were on the commission that approved the sketches. At their insistence, elements with a double meaning, Christian for the uninitiated and Hermetic for members of the secret society, were included in the composition. In the shadow of Europe's great powers, an invisible war unfolded, a clash of secret societies whose ambitions stretched far beyond national borders. The Hermetic Brotherhood of Venice, with its unique blend of esoteric knowledge and practical power, inevitably came into conflict with other occult organizations that sought to direct the course of European history. Relations with the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross, which emerged in the early 17th century in the German lands, were particularly strained. The Rosicrucians, who proclaimed the legendary Christian Rosenkreuz as their founder, posed a serious challenge to the Venetian Hermetics. Their manifestos, published in 1614 and 1615, called for a universal reformation of the world and contained criticism of the Catholic Church, Venice's most important ally. In the Brotherhood's secret archives, records were preserved of an extraordinary meeting of the Council of Ten, convened in 1616 to assess the, quote, Zero Master Antonio Nani, who held the title of, quote, presented a report on the spread of Rosicrucian influence at the courts of Protestant princes. The decision was made immediately to send 3 agents of the Brotherhood to the German lands disguised as itinerant alchemists to infiltrate the ranks of the Rosicrucians. This mission met with partial success. Venetian agents managed to establish that the Tübingen theologian Johann Valentin Andrea was behind the publication of the Rosicrucian manifestos. However, attempts to discredit the movement failed. The ideas of the Rosicrucians proved too appealing to European intellectuals, weary of religious wars and scholastic disputes. Unable to destroy their competitor, the Venetian Hermetics chose a different strategy. In 1623, posters mysteriously appeared in Paris announcing the presence of, quote, members of the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross in the city. This caused panic among the populace and attracted the attention of the authorities. Historians long considered this to be Rosicrucian self-promotion, but documents from the Venetian archives indicate that the action was organized by agents of the Hermetic Brotherhood to draw unwanted attention to their competitors. Even more complex were the relations with the emerging Masonic movement. When the first Grand Lodge was established in London in 1717, Venetian Hermetics immediately sent their observers there. Reports sent to Venice testified to a serious transformation of the ancient craft guild into an organization with philosophical and political ambitions. The Brotherhood's initial reaction was hostile. The Masons, with their ideals of equality and brotherhood of all people, posed a threat to the aristocratic spirit of the Venetian Republic. However, a deeper analysis of Masonic rituals, conducted by the Hermetics, revealed a significant influence of Egyptian mysteries and Hermetic philosophy on their symbolic system. This discovery led to a change in strategy. Instead of confrontation, the Brotherhood decided to infiltrate the Masonic movement, guiding its development in a direction favorable to itself. In 1733, the Adriatic Union Masonic Lodge was founded in Venice, with all leadership positions held by members of the Hermetic Brotherhood. Through this structure, they established contacts with Masonic organizations throughout Europe, creating an effective network for gathering information and spreading influence. In the heart of Venice, hidden from prying eyes, there existed a treasury of knowledge whose significance for world history is difficult to overstate. The Hermetic Library of the Brotherhood was not merely a collection of books, but a living organism that preserved the wisdom of millennia and nourished the minds of those who guided the destiny of the maritime republic from the shadows. The first mentions of the library date back to the mid-15th century, when the Venetian patrician Pietro Dolfin described in his diary a secret repository of books that are not even in the collection of the Pope himself. According to the testimonies of the few initiates, it was located in the underground chambers of the Palazzo Ca' Farsetti, situated at the foot of the Rialto Bridge. Access to the library was gained through a system of secret doors and corridors, beginning in the wine cellar and descending deep below the canal level. Unlike the public library of St. Mark, founded by Cardinal Bessarion, the Hermetic collection did not aim for quantitative wealth. Its value lay in the uniqueness of its manuscripts, many of which existed in a single copy. Here were preserved texts considered lost since the burning of the Library of Alexandria, original works of Hermes Trismegistus, alchemical treatises by Zosimos of Panopolis, astrological tables of Babylonian priests. A particular pride of the collection was the Quote One, a manuscript allegedly containing the complete text of the legendary Quote Two of Hermes Trismegistus, with commentaries by Alexandrian Neoplatonists. In official history, only fragments of this fundamental Hermetic text have survived, but in the Venetian library, if testimonies are to be believed, the complete version was preserved. No less valuable were the astrological manuscripts, which included, Quote, 3, by the Persian astronomer al-Sufi, with additions by Venetian masters. These star charts, created with astonishing precision, allowed for the prediction not only of seasonal phenomena, but also of rare astronomical events, giving the Brotherhood an advantage in planning strategic decisions. The library's alchemical collection included both theoretical treatises and practical guides. Here were preserved the works of Jabir ibn Hayyan, Raymond Lull, Arnold of Villanova. A special place was occupied by the manuscript Venetian Transmutations, a text created directly by members of the Brotherhood and describing unique methods of working with materials available only in the lagoons of Venice. The library was not a static collection. It was constantly replenished. Members of the Brotherhood, traveling on diplomatic and trade missions, had a special assignment: to seek out rare texts throughout the known world. When, in 1571, the Venetian ambassador in Constantinople discovered fragments of the works of the Neoplatonist Iamblichus in the ruins of a Byzantine monastery, a special expedition was sent to acquire them, despite the ongoing war with the Ottoman Empire. What became of this priceless collection? When, in 1797, Napoleon's troops entered Venice, ending the independence of the ancient republic, the Brotherhood decided to save the library. According to testimonies contained in a letter from the French officer Jean-Baptiste Marmont, presumably the most valuable manuscripts were transported and hidden. Traces of the Hermetic library are lost in the turbulent events of the Napoleonic era, but echoes of its existence continue to appear in the most unexpected places. In 1912, an alchemical treatise was discovered in a Trieste used bookstore, with an ex libris depicting a winged lion with a closed book, the secret sign of the Brotherhood's library. In 1967, during the restoration of the Palazzo Contarini del Bovolo, workers discovered a bricked-up room with empty bookshelves and strange symbols on the walls. As the 17th century drew to a close, the glorious Venetian Republic was no longer the maritime power that once dictated its will to the Mediterranean. The Ottoman Empire had wrested key eastern possessions from the Serenissima. The Portuguese and Spanish had seized control of global trade routes, and new centers of power, England, France, and Holland, were rapidly expanding their influence. For the Hermetic Brotherhood, a time of the greatest trials and transformation had arrived. In 1697, as the Venetian fleet struggled to hold its ground in the war with the Turks, the Brotherhood's Council of Ten convened an extraordinary meeting in a secret crypt beneath the church of San Giorgio Maggiore. For the first time in 2 centuries, the very existence of the organization was called into question. Master Alvise Pisani, bearing the title, presented an astrological forecast to those assembled that left no doubt. The stars foretold the decline of Venice as an independent power. The Republic's horoscope, cast at the moment of the first Doge's election in 727, was entering a phase of deep defeat. Saturn was returning to a position analogous to that observed during the fall of the Roman Empire. Pisani said, according to preserved protocols, the Brotherhood made an unprecedented decision. to begin a gradual relocation of its assets, knowledge, and influence to other European centers. A strategy of, quote, was developed. Instead of concentrating all power in Venice, a network of interconnected cells would be established across Europe. The first direction of expansion was London, a rapidly growing maritime power that was adopting many features of the Venetian system. In 1702, 3 members of the Brotherhood's inner circle, disguised as Italian merchants, established themselves in the British capital. They brought with them not only capital, but also carefully selected Hermetic manuscripts. Particular attention was paid to England's nascent banking system. The Brotherhood, which had perfected financial instruments in Venice for centuries, quickly recognized the potential of the Bank of England, founded in 1694. Through intermediaries, the Hermetics acquired a significant stake in this institution, securing the ability to influence the financial policy of the rising empire. The second direction was Vienna, the capital of the Habsburgs, traditional allies of Venice against the Ottoman threat. Here, members of the Brotherhood operated through Masonic lodges, which were experiencing a period of rapid growth in the early 18th century. Venetian Hermetics, with their rich experience in secret organization, quickly assumed leadership positions in Austrian Freemasonry, guiding its development in a direction consonant with their esoteric traditions. Especially interesting is the case of Count Saint-Germain, a mysterious figure who appeared at European courts in the mid-18th century. This man, who demonstrated extensive knowledge of alchemy, astrology, and Eastern languages, was, according to some accounts, a high-ranking emissary of the Venetian Brotherhood. His mission was to establish contacts with potential allies and seek out new talents to replenish the organization's ranks. In Venice itself, the Brotherhood also underwent significant changes. Recognizing the inevitable political decline of the Republic, the Hermetics focused on preserving its cultural and intellectual heritage. They secretly funded efforts to preserve the city's architectural masterpieces, supported talented artists and musicians, and contributed to the development of Venetian opera and masked theater. In the world of modern European political and economic institutions, a careful observer might notice strange coincidences. Symbols, organizational structures, and decision-making principles strikingly similar to those used by Venetian Hermetics centuries ago. This is no accident, but the result of a deliberate strategy by the Brotherhood to maintain its influence even after the fall of the Serenissima. When Napoleon's troops put an end to the independence of the Venetian Republic in 1797, many believed that the mysterious Hermetic Brotherhood had vanished with it. However, reality proved to be more complex. Decades before these events, the Brotherhood's leadership, foreseeing Venice's inevitable decline, had developed a plan to transform and disperse its influence across key centers of European power. One of the most noticeable traces of the Venetian legacy can be found in the architecture of Europe's central banks. The Bank of England, the German Bundesbank, the Bank of France, all were designed using principles of sacred geometry, applied by Hermetics for centuries. In their architecture, one can discover the same golden ratio proportions, the same symbolic elements that adorned Venetian palazzi. Particularly illustrative is the case of the Bank of Italy, whose main building in Rome contains elements almost identical to those found in the Palazzo Ca' Pesaro in Venice, the residence of one of the Brotherhood's leaders in the 17th century. Both buildings feature characteristic columns with capitals adorned with 7-pointed stars, and their central halls house similar mosaic floors depicting cosmological symbols. No less interesting are the parallels in the organizational structure of modern financial institutions. The European Central Bank is governed by a governing council consisting of 6 members of the executive board and the governors of the national central banks of the Eurozone countries. This model strikingly resembles the structure of the Council of Mercury, a division of the Brotherhood responsible for Venice's financial policy. In European diplomatic circles, elements of the Venetian tradition have also been preserved. The quote "two" system, where key decisions are made not in open plenary sessions, but during confidential meetings of 3 key participants, was developed by Venetian diplomats in the 16th century and actively used by the Brotherhood to manipulate international relations. Today, this model is standard practice in the European Union, where the most important decisions are often made during informal consultations between representatives of Germany, France, and the presiding country, and then only formally approved at official meetings. The symbolic legacy of the Brotherhood is also evident in modern European heraldry. The flag of the European Union, 12 gold stars on a blue background, is officially interpreted as a symbol of unity, perfection, and harmony. However, this composition bears a striking resemblance to astrological diagrams used by Venetian Hermetics to represent celestial harmony. In the Vatican archives, there is a 16th-century manuscript attributed to the Venetian astrologer Giovanni Battista Capuano, depicting an almost identical composition symbolizing, quote, "Perhaps most intriguing is the preservation of ritual elements in the ceremonies of European institutions of power. The inauguration procedure for presidents of some European countries includes elements strangely reminiscent of the Brotherhood's initiation rituals. The use of certain colors in clothing, specific gestures when taking an oath, a particular order of words. All of these have parallels in the secret ceremonies of Venetian Hermetics. Are there direct heirs to the Hermetic Brotherhood of Venice today? Official historians tend to believe that the organization ceased to exist with the fall of the Republic. However, some researchers point to strange coincidences and connections that are difficult to explain by mere chance. In 2008, during the financial crisis, at a meeting of European Central Bank governors in Basel, several participants were observed with identical cufflinks adorned with the image of a winged lion, the symbol of Saint Mark, and a secret sign of the Brotherhood. When a financial journalist tried to ascertain the meaning of this symbol, he was told that it was just a tribute to Venetian banking traditions. History is rarely as we see it in textbooks. Behind every great event, behind every turning point, stand not only well-known leaders, but also those who prefer to act from the shadows. Our journey through the secret corridors of power of the Venetian Republic is coming to an end, but the questions it raises are only just beginning to take shape. What then have we learned about the Hermetic Brotherhood of Venice? This organization was more than just a secret society. It was a kind of invisible institution of governance that existed in parallel with official power structures. While the Doges and the Council of Ten ruled openly, the Hermetics guided the fate of the Republic from the shadows, guided by ancient knowledge and long-term strategies. Their methods of influence were as sophisticated as they were effective. They never sought personal glory or official positions. Instead, they created complex networks of influence, acting through trusted individuals who held key but not the most prominent positions. They used astrological knowledge to select the ideal time for important decisions. They applied alchemical principles not only for material transformations, but also for the transformation of social and political structures. But the most important lesson we can draw from the history of the Brotherhood is an understanding of the nature of true power. It rarely manifests itself in loud statements or public displays of force. true power often acts imperceptibly, creating conditions and directing events in such a way that the results seem natural and inevitable. Did the Hermetic Brotherhood disappear with the fall of the Venetian Republic? Official history tells us yes, but if we have learned anything from our research, it is that official history often conceals more than it reveals. There is reason to believe that the Brotherhood, foreseeing the decline of Venice, transformed itself in advance, spreading its influence to new centers of power in Europe. A careful observer might notice strange parallels between the working methods of the Venetian Hermetics and the principles of operation of modern global institutions. The same symbols, the same organizational structures, the same approaches to decision-making. Coincidence? Perhaps. But in a world where knowledge has always been power, it is hard to imagine that such an effective system of governance would simply disappear without leaving heirs. Perhaps the true legacy of the Brotherhood lies not in specific organizations or people, but in the model of governance itself. A model where wisdom is valued above force, long-term planning above immediate gain, and the harmony of the whole above the interests of a part. In a world where political decisions are increasingly dictated by short-term electoral cycles and immediate crises, such an approach seems almost a lost art. And yet, when we look at the global processes unfolding today, we can sometimes catch echoes of that ancient wisdom, that invisible hand that once guided the fate of the most serene republic. Perhaps the Hermetic Brotherhood of Venice did not disappear, but simply became even more skilled at concealing its presence. After all, the best way to keep a secret is to convince the world that it does not exist.